Hi everyone, I'm Mark Harrison and this is a history of Rome. Last time we saw how, following the fall of Troy, Prince Aeneas had fled the doomed city and sailed west where, after an adventure in Carthage, he had gone on to land in Latium, and how his descendants Romulus and Remus had survived death through the actions of a she-wolf and a shepherd. And we also saw how Romulus had killed his brother before founding the city of Rome, and how he overcame the hostile actions of his neighbours, even incorporating many of them into the Roman state before dying and being deified as the god Quirinus. Let's continue. Following the death of Romulus, the Senate, whose main job at this time was to select a new king, had difficulty in doing just that. Endlessly they debated and deadlocked they remained, filling the power vacuum by rotating the rights of the king amongst themselves, with each senator holding the office for 5 days. Only after a year of dispute did they eventually agree on a candidate, a Sabine named Numa Pompilius, whose first wife, Titania, had been the daughter of Romulus' co-king, Titus Titius. Numa Pompilius was of a very different character to his predecessor. He was a pious man who liked to spend his time in quiet reflection. Indeed, so unsuited did he believe himself to be that he initially refused to accept the position, believing that Rome was still vulnerable to attack and needed another man of war to lead at this time. The Senate, though, would not accept his argument and continued to press him to become the next king. Under this pressure, he eventually agreed, but only after the gods had been consulted. Auguries were thus taken, and with the omens having been found to be good, Numa Pompilius finally accepted and became the second king of Rome. His character being in sharp contrast to that of his predecessor, his reign was also. Gone was the aggressive war leader, replaced by a man of peace and piety. As such, Numa's time at the helm was most notable not for conquest, but for the introduction of many of Rome's religious practices and offices. One of the most significant that he introduced was that of Pontifex Maximus, or chief priest, a position which would grow in importance during the days of the Republic to eventually become a cornerstone of power in the imperial age. Added to that, he established the office of Flamen, or priest, one each for the triad of Jupiter, Mars and Quirinus. These priests had many responsibilities and were accorded many special privileges. One of the most significant acts, though, was to remove the Vestal Virgins from Alba Longa and to bring them to Rome. Here they would tend the sacred flame of Vesta in the city for the next 1,000 years. Numa's religious predisposition was not restricted to offices and practices. He also took responsibility for temple building, notably that of Janus, the two-faced god after whom the month of January is named. And with this temple, the practice was adopted of closing the doors when the city was at peace. Throughout the long history of Rome, this rarely occurred, but for the reign of Numa Pompilius, it was never open. It was a feat that was never to be matched. In keeping with his peaceful nature and predilection for all things religious, he introduced the cult of Terminus, the god of boundaries. Through it, Numa hoped to set the limit of Roman territory, an endeavour in which he was obviously unsuccessful. This connection of Numa's with a non-temporal world was to be of great significance at a time when the population of Rome was being ravaged by plague. Numa, it was said, had a special relationship with the nymph Egeria, and when a brass shield fell miraculously from the sky, she told him that it was a gift from Jupiter, and that it had been sent for the protection of the city. Numa immediately understood the message and ordered that thanks be given to the gods. As a result, the plague was stopped, and this shield thus became a sacred object. Being a sacred object, Numa put in precautions to prevent its theft by ordering that 11 identical copies be made. It is said that when completed, the copies were so perfect that no mortal, not even Numa himself, could tell which was the original. From then on, to honour the gods, The now 12 shields were carried in procession through Rome each year by the Celii. These were 12 priests who were specifically chosen for the task from the youth of the patrician class. Now, having set the religious affairs of the city in order as he desired, Numa set about putting in writing the rituals and responsibilities of the several priesthoods that he had brought into being. It was a work that would cover several books. It was a legacy, however, that would go with him to the grave, quite literally, for when he died in 673 BC, after a reign of 42 years, the books were buried with him, honouring his request that in the future the knowledge of the priesthoods be passed down orally. And as a postscript to the achievements of Rome's second king, we can add something with which we all still live today, the calendar, which he divided into 12 months. A much shorter interregnum followed Numa's reign than the one that preceded it. This time the Senate moved quickly, and for their next king they chose another Latin, Tullus Hostilius, who was a grandson of Hostus Hostilius, who had fought with Romulus in the war between Rome and the Sabines, a war in which Hostus had perished. In Tullus Hostilius, the rule of the city had returned to an aggressive, warlike leader similar to Romulus. He was also a man that had little time for religious observances and was known to have hated the policies of his predecessor. It wasn't long before Tullus' martial personality began to assert itself. The city of Alba Longa was significant as being the place from which Romulus and Remus had originated. Historians have concluded that Alba Longa was destroyed at some time in the 7th century BC, but by whom they are unsure. Legend, however, gives the credit for that destruction to Tullus Hostilius. Livy notes that having gone to war with the Alba Longans, Tullus suggested, and it was agreed, to save the lives of the soldiers and to settle the conflict through the victory of champions. To this end, both cities chose a set of triplets each to contest the fight. The Horatii fought for Rome, while the Curiatii defended the interests of Alba Longa. The fight was said to be of long duration, with no man willing to give quarter. Eventually, though, there had to be a winner. And as the dust of combat settled, a single man emerged triumphant. It was one of the Horatii triplets, thus gifting the victory to the Romans. The resultant terms imposed by Tullus placed the Alba Longan dictator Matius Fafatius as a vassal of Rome. This vassalage Tullus soon put to the test when the Romans found themselves once again at war with the Etruscan city of Fidenae. This particular round began with the Fidenates revolting against Rome and breaking the treaty that they had signed following their previous defeat under Romulus. In response, Tullus raised a force and ordered Matius to join him. The two armies set up near the confluence of the Anio and Tiber rivers and waited. But when the Fidenates came, they did not do so alone. Another of Rome's previous antagonists, Veii, seeing an opportunity to rid the area of Roman dominance, had elected to join them in the fight. As battle commenced and the Fidenates and Romans engaged, the Alba Longans were suddenly seen turning away from the combat area and heading towards the mountains. Matius Fafatius had intended to break the terms of his treaty and to betray Rome. Tullus, however, quickly assessed the situation. Thinking on his feet, he declared to his troops, deliberately within earshot of the Fidenates, that he had ordered Matius to march in that direction. The Fidenates, hearing this, feared that the Alba Longans were preparing to charge down the hill and trap them. In panic, they broke off the engagement and fled. The Veientes, now left to face the Romans alone, could not stand. They, in their turn, were also defeated. The betrayal by their leader was to cost the Alba Longans dear. In retribution, the Romans razed the city to the ground, and any remaining inhabitants they forcibly relocated to Rome. As for Matius, he was imprisoned before eventually being executed. The displaced persons were treated honourably, given Roman citizenship and integrated into Roman society. To accommodate the new Alba Longan senators, Tullus Hostilius even had a new Senate house constructed, the Curia Hostilia. But the conclusion to hostilities with Alba Longa did not mean the end of war elsewhere on Rome's borders. It was not long before the Romans found themselves once again at loggerheads with the Sabines. The dispute began when Rome was accused of holding some of the Sabine people in detention. The Roman version of events, however, was that it was their merchants that had been detained by the Sabines whilst trading near the Temple of Feronia. The resulting conflict was brief but decisive. Following a swift Roman invasion of Sabine territory, the two armies met near the forest of Malatiosa, where the Sabines were once again crushed. In 642 BC, Tullus' 31-year-long reign came to an end, though not through his warring, but, as legend would have us believe, because of his impiety. As Rome suffered yet another plague, Tullus became ill. Looking to ensure his own survival, he finally turned his attention to the gods that he had so long neglected. Jupiter in particular he singled out for special consideration. For the supreme god, Tullus performed ritual and sacrifice. Jupiter, however, was seemingly unimpressed by Tullus' late conversion. Turning to anger, he enacted retribution upon the king, killing him and his family and destroying their home with a thunderbolt. It was an ignominious end to Rome's second and final Latin king. The Senate's next choice for monarch was another Sabine, Ancus Marcius, who was the grandson of the second king, Numa Pompilius. Like his grandfather, Ancus was a pious man, and once in power immediately began to look to the religious aspects of the state that had been neglected by his predecessor. To Rome's southern neighbours, the Latins, this new ruler, being the grandson of Numa, was perceived as being another militarily weak leader, and they took the opportunity to raid Roman lands. To begin with, Ancus looked to a diplomatic solution by sending an ambassador to demand a stop to the raids and to request payment of compensation. This response, however, simply emboldened the Latins, and they refused. It was then that they found out that Ancus was far from being weak in terms of arms. His patience exhausted, the Roman king declared war, raised an army and invaded Latium. Moving quickly, he captured the town of Politorium and forcibly resettled the inhabitants in Rome before withdrawing. When other Latins later reoccupied the town, he again sent his army south, and in an even more impressive campaign, he not only retook Politorium, but also the towns of Telenae, Ficana and Medula. Once more, the defeated citizens he sent to live in Rome. As for Politorium, this time he had it utterly destroyed. These fruitful campaigns in Latium were added to by military success in Etruria. Livy notes that Ancus expanded Roman territory in the northern region by taking complete control of Fidenae and by capturing a large area of land from Veii. He also adds that, in addition to his exploits north and south, Ancus also ventured west, extending Roman territory for the first time as far as the sea. Here, he had a new salt works constructed and the foundations laid for the port of Ostia. During his rule, Ancus Marcius had successfully blended the best parts of his predecessors while seemingly avoiding their major flaws. He died peacefully in 617 BC, having ruled the Roman people for 25 years. And so as Rome entered another interregnum, whilst the Senate debated on the choice of their next ruler, they may have reflected on what had been a largely successful period for the young city and its population. The 7th century BC had been a time of growing power and prosperity for the Roman kingdom. It remained to be seen, however, if the next 100 years would bring more of the same. If you like our work, please help by subscribing, pressing the bell button and commenting. And we'll see you next time on A History of Rome.